Ask Assembly Member Roberts to begin.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Mr. Matt, and belated happy birthday for yesterday. Oh. You have accepted the description of the Metropolitan Police as institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. However, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner does not accept that definition. Which of you is right?
I think I am. Based upon the evidence over successive decades, based upon the work of Dame Louise Casey recently, Sir William Macpherson more than 20 years ago, you're seeing cultural practices, systems and processes that, in my view, demonstrate institutionalised discrimination based on people's colour of skin, based upon their sexuality, based upon their gender. This is not a few rotten apples. This is not a few wrong uns. This is an institution that is worthy of change, but also needs to change.
Thank you. Quite rightly, the IOPC is looking into the individual cases raised within the Panorama documentary. But once their investigation is concluded, do you think it will be appropriate for there to be a further inquiry into the Metropolitan Police?
So we probably shouldn't talk about the
no, quite.
For obvious reasons. But in any event, A.M. Roberts will remember that one of the recommendations from Dame Louise Casey was to have a check in 2-3 years' time about how the recommendations have been implemented. I'll be announcing in due course what form that will take.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Can I bring in Assembly Member Boff?
This is like déjà vu, isn't it, Mr. Mayor? How effective were your actions in 2022 when we had a similar scandal?
Well, it's worth looking at what's happened since 2020, but also the response now versus 2022. He'll remember back in 2022, when I lost confidence in the Commission, I was criticised by Conservatives for doing so. In fact, the Conservatives summoned myself and Tom Windsor before the Police and Crime Committee on more than one occasion and refused to accept serious problems in the police service. I'm hoping this time there'll be a difference from the Conservatives. Also a big difference from the response of the current Commissioner to the previous Commissioner. And what's happened since 2022, there's at least 10 things I could set out that are different. There are now 200 officers who are employed to proactively uncover and deal with wrongdoing. Since 2022, there have been 1,500 officers who have been exited and staff from the police service. Operations Dragnet, Trawl, Onyx and Assure have led to the departure of hundreds of individuals due to vetting issues. We've also have internal reporting of wrongdoing has trebled since 2022. It's now more difficult to be a police officer. Previously, the vetting led to a 5% rejection of officers who want to be officers. Now it's 11%. A big difference from then. Since then, all 40,000 police officers and staff have received bespoke training on the values expected. We've invested £12 million from City Hall in a leadership academy, incredibly important in terms of supervision of officers. We drafted a private members' bill to address the issue of the need to reform police misconduct and performance framework, and I'm really pleased this government has taken on board the changes we asked for in the Veteran Regulations 2025 and the amendments which are really important. There is now a presumption of dismissal for proven gross misconduct. Serious criminal offences now automatically amount to gross misconduct. A presumption of accelerated hearings for former police officers, and chief constables, because of our lobbying, now have a right of appeal to a police appeals tribunal. And the final point in answer to the really serious question raised by the member is he should compare and contrast the response of this Commissioner once he discovered wrongdoing versus the attitude of the previous Commissioner when we discovered wrongdoing.
So did your actions work?
Well, there are 15,000 officers and staff who have been kicked out of the police service because of our actions. There is now a culture where whistleblowing has more than doubled. You've seen a situation now where, because of our actions, this Commission understands the importance of taking firm action fast. I can't share with the committee yet, with the Assembly yet, some of the changes that he'll see in the next few weeks, but he'll see in the next few weeks examples of the difference we've made in the form of what the IPC will be doing and what happens subsequently.
As a result of, I mean, you used Charing Cross Station as a reason for getting rid of the previous commissioner. Who should we get rid of now?
There were two big issues that I had in relation to Operation Hotton, and I was criticised by the Conservatives for doing so. One was the response to the serious issues raised by Hotton, by the then Commissioner. The Tories were happy with her response, I wasn't. And secondly, a lack of plan to win back trust and confidence from the former Commissioner. The Tories were happy with her lack of a plan. I wasn't. I lost confidence in the former Commissioner. The Tories were unhappy with that. She decided to resign, and I support that.
You seem to be fighting a party political battle here. This is not about party politics. It's about the protection of Londoners.
It's really important to make this point. Had it been for the Conservatives, the former Commissioner would still be in her job and things would have got worse, not better. It is really important to explain to Londoners the difference that's been made because of leadership from the current Commissioner and his new team and from City Hall. And I won't resile from ensuring Londoners get the police service we deserve rather than one that is institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic.
Who knows within the police service that things have changed?
Well, the 1,500 former police officers and staff will be Exhibit A, that things have changed. The 200 additional officers in the Professional Standards Directorate are Exhibit B, that things have changed. The speeding up of disciplinary hearings is Exhibit C. The fact that we now have officers trained in leadership and supervision is Exhibit E. The fact that you've got a situation now where every police officer and staff knows what is expected of them as Met Police officers is different to what it was before. The fact that we're now in a situation where officers are coming forward reporting other officers is also incredibly important. It's now more difficult to join the police service than it was before. It's far too easy to be a police officer in the past and far too difficult to get rid of a police officer in the past.
Well,
that's changed.
You say that, Mr Mayor, and you only had to view the Panorama programme to realise that many of those officers didn't know that the Met had changed. They did not know the Met had changed. And actually, you go on about internal reporting, and it took somebody from another police force to report the appalling behaviour of somebody at Charing Cross. So, are you sure police officers know that the Met has changed? Because those police officers didn't.
Well, I think what the BBC programme exposed, and I commend the work of the investigative journalist, is because of the cultural issues that Gareth Roberts and I just discussed, officers are now doing things away from when they know they'll be seen. He will have also seen those officers who are unwilling to condone or take part in the behaviour that is unacceptable. One of my concerns is why whistleblowers didn't come forward in Charing Cross Police Station in the most recent example, why those officers didn't have the confidence to do so. And that's some of the issues that the Commission will be looking into.
Mr Mayor, these are very weak excuses. The last staff survey of the Metropolitan Police revealed that only 10% understood the new Met for London programme. 10%. And that's after 2 years of 2 years later from the previous Charing Cross crisis. And only 13% have confidence in the Met leadership. I would suggest to you that the changes you put into place last time just haven't worked, and Londoners are going to suffer. And finally, before I go, because I'm up against time, are you convinced that women will be believed when coming forward with accusations of violence and rape?
Well, the numbers referred to a police-fed survey. I mean, I'll give them examples of some of the changes taking place, because it's a serious issue, and I'm sure it'll give me time, because it's an important issue, to explain some of the changes taking place. An inspector was dismissed in January 25 for what's been a member of a discriminatory WhatsApp group. A detective inspector was dismissed in May 25 for misuse of the Met Police Service system. A PC was found guilty of misconduct and given a final written warning in January 25 for use of an offensive term. Another PC was convicted of common assault following his arrest of a black woman. A sergeant was investigated in relation to his use of force. A staff member was forced to resign because of the way they dealt with a 999 call handler. There's a range of cases where the police have taken action against individuals, and there's been a cultural change as well. The time it takes for somebody against whom an allegation is made before it reaches a hearing has been accelerated. But more importantly, officers now know they can report misconduct and won't have the issues there were previously. And that's what's led to 1,500 police officers and staff being kicked out of the police service. Neither the Commissioner or myself accepts the current position, but there would have been status quo and no change at all if there had been the Conservatives in charge of police in London in 2020, 2022.
Okay, we're now moving on to Assembly Member Small Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr Mayor. The Panorama documentary took part at Charing Cross Station, a police station in my constituency, and it's shown a number of serving officers making racist, misogynistic and Islamophobic comments, and you'll be aware that this isn't the first time that there have been issues at that particular police station in terms of officers falling short of the values and standards that Londoners would expect. What assurances can you provide to my constituents, particularly those who are women and those who are of Islamic faith, that in any future dealings with the police, they're going to be treated fairly, equally and with respect?
Well, I think we can't run away from the fact that Londoners have been let down. We entrust police officers with these huge amount of powers, and we expect them to exercise their discretion lawfully, but also in a way that doesn't discriminate against people based upon their gender, their ethnic origin, their religion, and definitely we don't expect police officers to use excessive force. Anybody who watched that programme can't have not had their confidence shaken. I was angry when I watched that programme. They've let down Londoners, they've let down the police service, they've let down the tens of thousands of police officers and staff who work incredibly hard to keep our city safe. It's worth reminding ourselves that, within moments of the awful terrorist attack in Manchester, police officers were there very, very quickly and took down the terrorists. An example of police officers running towards danger and saving other people as well. And I think one of the questions that I put to the Commissioner when I first discovered the BBC investigation was, how could this have happened at the same police station? And it took the BBC to expose this, as opposed to a whistleblower. And those are some of the things that the police will need to consider in terms of accelerating the changes we need to see. Any woman who's a victim of a serious offence will now be thinking, when she sees that programme, will she have a situation where a police officer behaves the way that sergeant behaved in relation to denigrating and trivialising what are serious concerns raised by a victim?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Ahmed.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much for explaining the forward plan and everything that has happened with regard to since the Casey report and the actions that have been taken. You, like me, will share the gut-wrenching disgust that Londoners had over what we saw 10 days ago on the Panorama programme. Next week, the Police and Crime Committee is meeting. That is, of course, the elected committee that has oversight of police and crime in London. Mr Mayor, do you agree with me that the Commissioner should attend that meeting to actually explain to Londoners what is going to happen regarding Charing Cross and other cultural issues, and take the opportunity to reassure Londoners?
Look, I'm not sure what the Commissioner's diary is, but I think the Met Police Service should be at the committee to explain some of the concerns you've raised and to respond to the concerns that you've raised. I know the Commissioner has been meeting leaders across London to discuss the issues raised by the Panorama programme. I'm not sure about the date next week, but I can take back the comments she's made.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Okay, let's move on to Assembly Member Hall.
Okay, thank you. Morning, Mr Mayor. I'm discussing the protests. So on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar and on the day of the horrific terror attack in Manchester, pro-Palestinian protesters gathered along Whitehall and the Cenotaph to chant offensive slogans and clap to them, play loud music and wave offensive signs. Protesters gathered at Liverpool Street Station, screaming chants at passing commuters. Protesters could be heard chanting "from the river to the sea" and describing Israel as a terror state. So on the day of the Manchester terror attack, was that behaviour appropriate?
No, I don't think it was. I think it's more to distinguish between what's lawful and what's considerate, mindful and sensitive. And it's worth just spending time talking to Jewish people. You know, there is one state that has a Jewish majority, and many people have an affinity to that who are of the Jewish faith. And on the day when a place of worship, on the Day of Atonement, has been attacked by a terrorist, you can understand, I hope, why Jewish people are feeling frightened. And let's not go to what the law is. I think you use the word appropriate. That's a good word. I don't think it's appropriate because people are feeling scared and frightened more so than they have, you know, in the recent past.
Okay, so do you think that the behaviour of the protesters in Whitehall and at Liverpool Street is anti-Semitic?
Well, you know, you're asking a general question about individuals' behaviour. I think it's insensitive, and I think it's...
No, is it anti-Semitic?
No, I don't think marching's anti-Semitic.
So you don't think screaming from the river to the sea and calling it a terror state is anti-Semitic?
So the members now extended a question from is the march anti-Semitic to now specific phrases of anti-Semitic.
Well, the phrase is constantly being used during these hate marches. This is why I'm asking the question. Do you think to scream from the river to the sea, which they're doing during these hate marches, is appropriate? Do you think it is anti-Semitic?
Okay, I don't think it's anti-Semitic, and I think it's all about context. And we had the same conversation, by the way, Chair, a month ago when the member was arguing that the far right should be allowed to march, and we were having this conversation about Article 10 and freedom of expression. Now, I already said I think it's inappropriate and insensitive on the day of a terrorist attack to have these sorts of marches. Some slogans can be anti-Semitic, but it's all about context. And in certain contexts, yes, those slogans are anti-Semitic. In other contexts, they're not.
Well, we will differ on that view. All we ever hear is from the river to the sea, and we all know what that means, and that is anti-Semitic. You released a statement the day after the protests, and at no point did you criticise the appalling behaviour we saw. You were unequivocal when you were talking about one particular protest last month, claiming that that was far right. Well, so why don't you describe these protests as clearly? Because they're not only plainly wrong, they are anti-Semitic.
Look, the difference, I would say, respectfully, between the member and myself is I'm consistent. So the member argues for the right of the far right to protest, but criticises pro-Palestinians.
They're not far right. They wave flags like this. That does not make me far right. That makes me very patriotic, actually. So you immediately come down on those, and yet we have had these anti-Semitic comments constantly from these hate marches, and you don't comment on that at all. Last month you said politicians have refused to condemn the rising tide of hatred in this country. So you should be happy to condemn the behaviour we saw at these pro-Palestinian protests.
Well, again, we're going to disagree here because I think Stephen Yaxley Lennon is a racist. He's a violent racist, and when he organises a march, it's a far-right march.
Isn't it interesting? That is racist. To call people, to say that from the river to the sea isn't, of course, no, because perhaps that's coming from a side that should be allowed to say that. To say terror state, perhaps that's allowed as well. It's amazing, isn't it? And yet merely flying a flag, immediately it's far right. I mean, do you actually understand why the Jewish community feels unable to do, as you say, live, work and worship freely without fear of harassment, discrimination, intimidation or violence when they see the duplicity of your remarks when discussing protests on different sides? Do you not understand why they are so concerned about this?
I've never mentioned flags. I know she's obsessed by flags. I've never mentioned flags. I'm quite clear in relation to what rights were allowed in terms of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, the right to protest, the cornerstone of our democracy. Even when you disagree with what people are protesting about, I will fight to the death the right to protest and the right to march and so forth. Even the right of Stephen Yaxley Lennon, a racist, to march. He's allowed to do so.
Mr. Mayor, look, you are the mayor of this wonderful city. Does it not worry you that there is one community that has to lock its children in schools for their safety? There is one community that can't come into London because of their listening to chants like from the river to the sea. where they're looking at Palestinian flags and hostility towards them. Do you not see that in London, to have one community that is so badly disadvantaged by what is going on with these anti-Semitic chants, that you, as mayor of this great city, should do something about that?
Chair, I couldn't be clear in my remarks in relation to my concern about the fear, the increased fear Jewish Londoners and Jewish people across the globe are feeling after the events of last Thursday. I've gone out of my way since October the 7th, 2023, to reassure Jewish Londoners and Jewish people across the country and across the...
But they don't feel reassured. How can they feel reassured?
Member,
But
there's a number of interruptions now that you're making. I understand the point
mainly
you tried
because
to
he's
get
not
across.
listening, Chair.
But he
He's
might
not
not be
listening
but
and
you
he's
can't-
not understanding.
But you can't keep interrupting. You have to allow him to answer in the way that he does, and then you can come back again. No one will object to that.
I tell you what,
Yeah?
I'll finish here because you will not do anything about this, and shame on you, because our Jewish community need looking after, and as Mayor of London, you are not doing that. And my time is up, Chairman. Thank you.
Chair, we've got 3 hours here. I'm not sure why
Your
the
time's
members...
not up
I
because
mean,
the Mayor's going to respond.
Yeah, on the one hand, the member claims it's an important issue, then she doesn't want to talk about it. And I appreciate that these are important issues. That's why I want to respond. Londoners expect the Mayor to respond to the very serious charge made by the member of the Conservative Party, the leader, the current leader of the Conservative Party. I'm really concerned about the heightened fear there is amongst Jewish people in London and across the country. One of the first things I did after the terror attack in Manchester was speak to the police service to make sure there was increased visible policing in and around the Jewish community for obvious reasons. I'm well aware there are places of worship that demand security for the only reason because they're synagogues. There are places of education that demand security for the only reason because there's Jewish children that go there. There are Jewish Londoners who are scared to leave their homes because of the fact of their faith. That's one of the reasons, for example, why, because of the lobbying of Anne Clark, we had the 310 bus taking people across London, and we're going to make sure we do what we can to keep Jewish people safe, and they feel safe. And that's one of the reasons why, in my opening comments, I made those remarks.
Thank you. Right, now we're moving on to Assembly Member Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Mr Mayor. And I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear me wanting to talk about this issue. Well, you know, it's an issue I've been very passionate about over the last year and a half since I've been elected, and indeed before that. So on Friday, the Home Secretary asked protesters to show some love and solidarity to those who've been murdered and not go ahead with protests at the weekend. The Met Police made a similar request on Thursday afternoon, asking them to consider pausing your activity and postponing it for another weekend. And in relation to events on Tuesday, the Prime Minister asked university students not to protest, saying it was un-British to have so little respect for others. First time I think I've ever agreed with the Prime Minister. And also, first time I've ever agreed with the Education Secretary, who asked I would urge them to pause, reflect, to remember our shared humanity. Now, you didn't make a similar request, did you, Mr Mayor?
Well, I agree with the comments made by the Prime Minister, the Education Secretary and the Home Secretary about the sensitivity in this issue. Nobody's talking about what people's rights are. That's really important that we distinguish, and neither did any of those people. The rights people have, but it's about being sensitive and having empathy to how people are feeling. By the way, I'm regularly criticised for doing too much communication. I'm being criticised for doing not enough communication. But I've been quite clear in relation to, you know, ever since I first became mayor, one of the first events I did was to attend Yom HaShoah to reassure Jewish people about this city being a beacon of people to be safe in. And it is really important we're sensitive to, yes, of course we've got rights, you know, we're not breaking the law, but it's just been a bit hurtful, it's been a bit insensitive, it's inadvertently leading to people feeling scared. And that's why we should be sensitive to these issues.
Absolutely, we should be sensitive, and that's why all those four Labour politicians who I've just quoted all respectfully asked those protesters to not protest on Saturday, to not protest on Tuesday, on the anniversary of that horrific massacre in Israel, 1,200 people killed and the hostages taken. But you asked people to be mindful. Now, I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, how mindful do you think the chants like globalise the Intifada really are?
I'm really happy to play semantics with the Reform Party all day long. We're going to compare and contrast words we use in terms of public discourse and debate. Look, I'm quite clear in relation to what happened last Thursday was a heinous terrorist attack. The only reason those people were attacked was because they were Jewish. The only people that place of worship was attacked was because it was a synagogue. We also know, park for a second, it's the most religious day in the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur. Jewish people were fasted and, repenting, not having access to their phone. As soon as word spread about that attack on the synagogue, people were really, really scared. People were staying in their homes and not leaving homes. And what I want to see is people being kind to their neighbours, showing friendship, checking up on their friends, seeing how they're doing, how they're feeling. You can call that mindful, you can call that being a good citizen, you can call that being British, but it's basic humanity. And we can debate words or semantics, but I know, as the mayor for more than 9 years, how I've made Londoners have a sense of belonging, and how the Reform Party has done the opposite.
Back to my question, globalise the Intifada. That is not a mindful thing to say, is it, Mr Mayor?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to get into the definition of semantics, but I can understand how that's felt by Jewish people. Jewish people feel when they hear that you're, whether you intend it or not, what you're suggesting is that they are at danger in relation to the consequences of the Intifada being globalised. Of course I get that.
And you've said it's all about context when you're discussing with Assembly Member Hall, and we know what the context is. We found out what the context is on Thursday last week. For 2 years, we've had this untrammelled anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews, river to the sea, globalise the Intifada. We know what it means. We know what it means. And it's been allowed, this culture has festered for 2 years, Mr Mayor. And you can talk about being mindful, you can talk about all the platitudes. Look, if there were awards for hand-wringing and platitudes, you'd win them every time, Mr Mayor. You absolutely would. But what we want is action. You talk about Jewish members of our community feeling scared, feeling frightened. The brave men and women of groups like CST and Shomrim, they're not frightened, they're angry that they have to be doing what they're doing because this culture has been allowed to fester in our city, in our country, and we saw what happened on Thursday last week when it's not nipped in the bud. That's what we're seeing in London, what we've seen for the last 2 years. It's not just about last weekend, it's not just about last Tuesday, it's not just about last Thursday. It's happened repeatedly. And the powers are there to intervene. You have the powers under the Public Order Act to intervene, to impose conditions, and if necessary, to stop these marches going ahead. Nobody wants to block the right to protest per se. Certainly none of us on this side of the chamber, but where they cross the line into hatred, into inciting violence, and then that violence has happened as a consequence, that's where we're asking you to intervene, Mr Mayor.
Well, Chair, I must be given a chance to respond to the various assertions made by the member. It's very important. So firstly, there are no powers under the Public Order Act for the mayor to stop a march or to disrupt a march. It's really important you understand the law if you're going to be the party of government. Point number 2, anti-Semitism didn't begin on October the 7th, 2023. Point number 3, it's arguably the oldest form of hatred known to mankind. Point number 4, I was the Mayor of London that went to synagogues in the weeks preceding the terrorist attack on a synagogue in Pittsburgh in the USA. That was before October the 7th, 2023. I'm also the Mayor who has invested a huge amount of money in educating young people across London about the dangers of anti-Semitism and other forms of hate crime, to teach our young people to be resilient and stoic when it comes to hatred against their fellow citizens because of the colour of their skin or because of the God they worship. I'm also aware about the importance of language, which is why you won't hear me using some of the language members of the Reform Party use, because it encourages, it mainstream, it normalises hatred, which is why, for example, last summer, when there were race riots across the country and they weren't in London, I spent a lot of time with the Jewish community, the Muslim community and others showing solidarity as well. But does he understand the ripples of fear that marches in the centre of London organised by the far right lead to Jewish families, lead to Muslim families, lead to black families?
As often happens, Mr Mayor, you're asking me a question. I'm very happy to swap places if you want to ask me questions. I'm going to have to draw a line to it there because I don't want to take up too much time from my wonderful
This is the problem, Chair. They don't want to debate because their arguments fall down when there's scrutiny and some debate. That's the problem with the Reform Party.
Let the member finish.
You don't answer the question, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, actually, I will ask one more question. Why did the Jewish community not feel loved and wanted when other people do?
Well, I'm really happy to compare and contrast the numbers of Jewish supporters of the Labour Party versus Jewish supporters of the Reform Party. I want every
we'll see in the local elections next year, Mr Mayor.
I want I want every Londoner to feel loved or wanted, whether you're a member of the Reform. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but, you know, the Reform Party did stand at the last mayoral election, and you were the sole Reform candidate. You've got another person now who didn't get there by winning an election as a Reform member. Let's be quite clear. And so... Well,
OK, right. Assembly Member Bakari.
Thank you. Unlike some members here, I don't have a massive ego. I know we have a job to do, and that is to represent Londoners, all Londoners. And I know that the London Assembly and its members have a responsibility to make sure that we do nothing or say nothing that will divide our communities. I am incredibly worried by some of the rhetoric and some of the things that have been said today already that is going to cause real tension in our communities. We do not need that. We definitely do not need that. We need freedom of speech. We need to make sure that we have freedom of protest. We need to make sure we have freedom of worship. We need to make sure we have freedom to live in peace. And we stand with our Jewish communities in the wake of that horrific attack. And we must do all we can to heal the divisions and to make sure that communities of faith are safe from terror attacks against places of worship, whether they are synagogues or mosques. Now, Mr. Mayor, do you support the Home Secretary's decision to give police the power to decide how citizens are allowed to protest at this decision may actually increase tensions and potentially cause a breakdown of trust?
sorry, I'm not sure what powers she means.
The Home Secretary has been given a decision to give police the power to decide how citizens are allowed to protest. And how do you feel this is going to impact the increased tensions that this is going to have, and even increased tension between the police and a breakdown of a potential trust?
Yeah, Chair, I've not seen any details of any plans, and I'll examine them when I see them and stuff. But I'm not sure if they've been published. If they have, I've not seen them.
OK. We've now got... sorry, Assembly Member Clark. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just want to take a step back, because I think what's always been apparent to me, as somebody who represents the largest Jewish population in the country, is the time you've spent with the Jewish community, whether that's before terrorist attacks of October the 7th or after. I've been in Barnet with you when you've walked alongside us with the police. I've visited synagogues with you. I know you've had Seder dinners with local families. It's those sorts of actions that show to me what you do with every other London community, is that you're with them, you connect with them, and you're with them at all times. And I think this conversation has been really disappointing, that it seems to me that some members around this table have decided to highlight one community and use that as some sort of political football, and I think it's profoundly unfair. But moving on from that, I really want to thank you and your office, because immediately following that horrific terrorist incident in Manchester, I had a phone call from your office. Barry Rawlings, the leader of Barnet Council, had a phone call from your office to check in, to see what more do we need in Barnet, because you knew it was important, and it is important. But I'm coming on to my question. The following morning, I was out for a walk with the police in Golders Green with Sarah Sackman, the local MP, and with Councillor Sarah Conway, who's our lead member for community safety in Barnet. And the three of us walked with police for, I don't know, probably a couple of hours, walking past Jewish sites, but also walking Golders Green High Street, where there's a number of charities and shops, and, you know, that's where people are. And what really struck me was with how many people stopped their cars, how many people stopped us in the street, just to thank the police officers for being there. And the following evening, I joined a local shul for Shabbat prayers. And the same thing happened. It was person after person just stopping, thanking the police for being there. And so I wonder if you would join me in thanking the police for stepping up immediately. A lot of them cancelled annual leave. They changed their working patterns. The police changed where they were going to be in those days following that terrorist attack, because they knew that those people, the Jewish community, would be feeling unsafe, and that there was also possibly a threat to them. But that's what they did. They stepped up, they stepped out, and they were there. And it really struck me just how many people stopped to thank them.
Well, thanks for your comments. I spent a lot of time this week with the leader of Barnet Council, in fact yesterday, because she'll be aware that the biggest Jewish community between Tel Aviv and New York is in Barnet. A huge community. For obvious reasons, there's a heightened sense of fear. And by the way, I'm not divulging confidences. After every terror attack, there's a fear of a copycat terror attack, which is why increased field policing is so important. And also, by the way, she'll know, because of the history Jewish people have, they know the need for additional security because they can't rely upon the state. History tells them that. And that's one of the reasons why the Community Security Trust was set up, and they do a brilliant job. She will also know from work in Barnet, the CST has given advice to Muslim communities, synagogues given advice to mosques, how they can help each other to keep other places of worship safe as well. And she will also be aware that in her wonderful community of Barnet, you had Muslim representatives also going to show a hand of friendship to Jewish communities because they understood the fear there was. Wouldn't it have been far better to talk about that rather than fueling division, as some members of the Assembly appeared to want to do? I'm also quite clear, though, about this. You know, the police may be imperfect, there may be institutional problems in the police service, but I see on a daily basis the difference they make to communities like hers, where people feel safer when they see a police officer. But the Commissioner himself was out and about. I think he went to shul as well. I think it's Hedgen, in relation to which God he worships, but that's another story. But he was there to show solidarity, but also to show the importance of security to that community.
Thank you for that.
Okay, on this particular topic, is there any more Assembly members that need to come in? Okay, then I'm going to move to the final area of the oral update, call on Assembly Member Georgiou.